So I've always known about Treetops, and it's always been this sort of shining city on the hill. And so when Helen invited me to spend a summer here, I was, of course, ecstatic. I'd never been away from home before. My memory is I just practically jumped on the airplane. I'd never been on an airplane. And I was 11 years old, first time really away from home. And in those days, when you rode an airplane, you had to dress up. And I still remember how dressed I was, and I had white gloves. And the reason I remember I had white gloves is because Vida met me in New York City. I had to take a bus into the city, and she met the bus, and she always told the story about how I got off the bus in these little white gloves and my little suit. Those were the days. Almost the first day, I was saying, Aunt Helen, look at this. And one of the campers said, why do you call her Aunt Helen? And I said, oh, because she's my aunt. But I quickly learned, no, she's Helen. And so I learned it's Leo and Walter and Helen. And I, tried not to let anyone know I was actually related. So camping wasn't that unusual an experience, but I'd never been close to a horse. And of course, like many little girls, I was completely horse crazy. And so I was totally in seventh heaven. I spent all of my time that I could with the horses. By the time I ended my 2 summers, I had a Red Cross certificate in canoeing, I think, and sailing for sure. And so I learned to sail, I learned to canoe. Everything was like this, like opening up a gift at Christmas time. And you know what was one of the most fond memories? You're going to laugh. Mumbledy peg. Playing Mumbledy peg, which I'd never heard of before either. And
a long tradition.
A long tradition. So do they still do Mumbledy peg?
Yes, they do.
Oh, good.
Yes, they do.
With the Boy Scout knives?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Yeah, I've somehow lost mine. I had my name on it. My great sorrow was the third year, super senior year. In those years, they alternated boys and girls, and it was the boys' year to come back as super seniors.
But you did come back.
I did, as soon as possible. Now, I believe I came back in 53, because I'm almost positive I was 15 that first year. I was very, very junior. I really wasn't a counselor, although I considered myself one. I washed dishes. I worked in the kitchen that summer, and boy, I learned a lot. Well, Harry Eldridge, of course, was a big influence on me. Lloyd Morgan, Roger, Harry, and Lloyd, the three musketeers, basically. And of course, but Cola and Bernard. Cola Hayden was a remarkable person. She was extremely creative. Cola was a genius with words, and she made up words. I mean, she could have a conversation with you with made-up words, and it would make sense. But she created this character, Po Batty, and Po Batty was a butterfly collector. And so when Po Batty always had a butterfly net over his shoulders, and other paraphernalia. I remember maybe like a floppy hat or something. But Po Batty had these adventures, and the Po Batty plays every summer. There was a Po Batty play, and so she was another really big influence. I wonder if that's why I love theater so much. I was here of a span, I say 10 years, because I started in 53, and 63 was my last summer as a counselor, because our baby was born in 64. Otherwise, we probably would have come back. But except for 1960 was the year we were married. So
yeah. And do I understand that when you married your husband, Hugh, that you didn't first take him directly to Treetops?
I did not want to do that to him. I thought, Treetops, everybody's related and everybody's been here forever. And I think it's hard at first for a new person to come in who's never been here, hasn't been a camper, doesn't know the culture. I didn't want to do that to him, right after we were married. We were married May 31st, and we would have been here a week later, practically, or several weeks later. So now I'm not taking it into what I call the crucible. We already knew when I came in '59 that we wanted to get married. So we corresponded during that year. And he knew a lot about Treetops. But yeah, he's so easygoing. Whatever. Came back then, the summer of '61. And sure enough, he became the tennis counselor. I don't think he'd ever played tennis before. And the sailing counselor. He'd never sailed before, but Franz taught him how. The 2 days before camp. And we lived in what we called then the goat pen tent, just above the tennis court, below the shop. And there was a little tent set back on the edge of the pine forest there. And my sister Bee, who's now Billy Whitaker, but Bee Lacey at the time, my sister and I had tented together there when she was like a junior counselor the summer before. And then Hugh and I stayed in the goat pen tent. And now it's like it's all overgrown. I feel like a whole forest grew up where the goat pen tent was. Could it have been that long ago? Well, I definitely became an environmentalist when I was a child because of Treetops. And because of Walter Clark and Walter had this gift of explaining the way the world works without you realizing how much you were learning. But Walter was, cutting edge, way ahead of his time as far as pesticides go and organic gardening. And people used to come here, I'm sure you know, to look at this organic garden and ground. And Walter used to say that when they took over this place, that the ground, the earth, was packed hard. He said, as hard, I remember him saying, as hard as that road out there, that's what it was like. But slowly but surely, with composting and doing organic gardening, it transformed the gardens into this rich soil. That made a huge impression on me. And the pile would grow and grow and grow. And by the end of the summer, Walter would reach in to the middle of the compost pile down at the bottom and pull out a handful of rich, beautiful, earthy soil that you could eat it if you wanted to. So it's because of that, and because of the awareness here of the environment. And when Rachel Carson came out with Silent Spring, like I said, we discussed it in staff meetings, so we were made very aware without knowing about how the earth works and should work. So that was always then a part of me. I was tuned in to trails because of my experience here, really. And trails were part of my life. Hiking trails, riding trails. I didn't know about ski trails at the time, but I learned that first winter, oh, this is really great. Because cross-country skiing is pretty big in Anchorage. Mm. So, and there already were cross-country ski trails, but they were, up in the woods, and they didn't go anywhere. I wanted a trail system that took every kid to every school and every park. The kids could get there on their bicycles without being run over by a car. Helen, of course, I always stayed in touch with. What happened was a building got built so it blocked the view of the clock that you used to see from their balcony. And so I say, how could, that is too bad. This building is being built right in front of this view. And that's when she turned to me and she said, now, my dear, she said, you really need to get used to change. You have to accept change. And if you can't accept change, you'll have a very unhappy old age. She and Leo always planted the flower bed along the road. And after she left, others took it over, but they planted it differently, and she did. But she was so pleased that the flowers continued, that she didn't care if it was different. It was just the fact that there were flowers there. And I think she would definitely approve of the growth, and she believed in adapting to change. Yeah. At first, I didn't even see the changes. I just saw the main house and the farmhouse, of course, first, and the rocks all look way smaller, which I think is funny. But I felt so at home, and I was so impressed with the garden. I thought, wow, look at this. This is fabulous. Oh my gosh, Helen would have so loved this. And Leo, and Walter too, of course. I mean, really and truly, I think they would all be so happy with the gardening and the growth. And then I started noticing, like, that uphill grill. I was like, wow, but it's beautiful. I thought, oh, what a great idea that is. And I was really taken aback when I saw the second tent line. Oh my gosh, you can have another tent line? You know, you can see the philosophy, and you can see the freedom of the kids and their involvement in what's going on. Even now at Friends Weekend, you can see that. But no, I would say it is essentially the same. And things have changed a lot, but in so many ways, in important ways, it hasn't changed. Say, this is Camelot. This is Camelot. It is a place and time that never changes in the essential ways, and it's heaven.